Doing fantastic, Mark. Thanks for being here, man. So the
Yeah, mate.
stage is yours. Go for it.
No, cool. Well, look, thanks for having me. I mean, I look forward to kind of a bit of a conversational platform here, and definitely kind of Q&A. Everyone's got all different levels of experience and stories. So I'll just tell a little bit about mine and what's worked in my experience, and then love to kind of bounce some ideas around. But I'll apologize first. The the funny thing about these Zoom calls now is you get to stare at your own image in your video camera. I have an ongoing bet with my wife that I can't carry this funny beard shape here, and I've totally forgot that I was going to be talking in front of a bunch of people tonight, so I wasn't prepared to shave it off. I need to win this, so you can look at my lopsidedness for a while.
That's classic. We'll have the video editor fix this afterwards. No worries, man. You'll have a luscious
just color one side in. So yeah, I mean, so my name's Mark Wilton. Obviously the accent's not from around here. I am from New Zealand originally. I live in the northwest suburbs of Chicagoland. Have done so for it'll be 11 years this year. I got into real estate investing back in 2013. My backstory is my father passed away, got the call, traveled back. It wasn't until I got back here to Chicago that, well, you know what, there's this funny little purple and black book that he's talked to me about for years and years that I'd never read. So I thought I'd open it up. Obviously that, for those that do know or don't know, that is Rich Dad, Poor Dad. So read that. That started me on my real estate journey. Flipped my first house in 2014. That was in Northlake. Did okay off it. Did that with a joint venture. And really from there, I mean, I knew I was working full-time corporate America. I knew real estate had to be a big part of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do with my family. And so really, I wanted to find a way to get in and around the guys that were doing it, and joined up with a tear down new construction company doing a lot of obviously tear downs here, and they would work in the northwest suburbs and in the North Shore. And I kind of found a bit of a strength of like looking at their operations as a whole, looking at the thing as, hey, there is a start point and there is an end point, and the house goes through that the whole way. And that's why I love the BRRRR method. We can talk about the BRRRR method a little later on, but the BRRRR method, there is the deals, it's fund the deal, it's rehab the deal, it's rent it out and refinance it. So it's like this workflow. So I spent about 18 months with them, helping them look at some of their operational stuff, working with their project management team, their listing agents on the back end, how they were moving some of these. At that point, it was million to about million three was their niche. Then I got picked up by a flipping company down in the far south suburbs. So I worked with them for about another 18 months. And again, like I was learning from them about flipping and about real estate investing and how to acquire deals and all that sort of stuff. And in turn, I was trying to provide value around helping them systematize some of their stuff, like policies and procedures. So when the company acquires a deal, they always do A, B, C through to X, Y, and Z to make sure it funnels through that workflow fast enough. So that was a lot of fun. They were doing about 25 flips at a time, anywhere from North Shore, 6,500 square foot interior remodel up there, down to the smaller 30, 35,000 cosmetic remodels down the south suburbs. But a house is a house, a flip's a flip. And to some degree, it still has to go through that pipeline. You've still got to deal with inspectors, whether it's on a $2 million remodel or whether it's a $30,000 rehab. You're just dealing with a lot more issues and a lot more questions. So went from there and partnered up with a good buddy of mine. He was looking to expand out his rental portfolio out in the western suburbs. So I jumped on board with him, kind of more in a project manager, property manager, again, like an operational role, and helped him to expand out his rental portfolio. So we were talking earlier about Cook County and the new regulations coming into place, but a lot of my experience is actually in the Will counties, DuPage counties, those kind of areas. So I don't necessarily have a lot of experience in the Cook County itself, but yeah, that was a lot of fun. COVID hit, went a little bit of a different direction, jumped on board more in a business development role with a company called Click Invest. Click Invest essentially is a brokerage for investors based here in Chicago, and we also focus down in Tampa and Orlando. So those are our 3 markets. But bottom line, we help investors looking for single family flips and rentals see more deal flow. So every day, I love it because every day I get to chat to other investors with all sorts of different experience about essentially the same things: finding deals, finding money, rehabbing, managing tenants, all that sort of stuff. So that's kind of a bit of my background. But really the 2 things that I love to talk about the most, and this is where I really would love at the end of the presentation or the end of the chat to hear other people's stories and how they've implemented stuff. But the biggest thing that I've always come across when there has been an issue that has come up, whether it's in managing a contractor or whether it's in managing a tenant, is because expectations weren't set up front. They didn't know how to read your mind. They don't know what standards you need to meet unless you tell them. And so a lot of it came around the issues you would see when you do the punch list walk on your rehab. Okay, how do I prevent that issue happening again? So I would put documentation at the beginning that goes into the contractor packet. Same thing happens with tenants. When a tenant is moving out, that is one of the hardest conversations to have around deducting their security deposit. Because if they don't know what you're talking about, they don't know your expectation, they're going to leave it in what they think is clean. And a lot of the time, it doesn't meet your expectation. You wish you had talked about it when you moved in. So to get back to the rehabbing side of things, the biggest issue I see happen all the time is you put together a scope of work, and John, I mean, facilitate a Q&A here too, but the biggest thing that happens is you'll put together what you think is a detailed scope of work. I want the kitchen remodeled, I want a bath and a half done, I want trim, I want paint, I want light fixtures. But if you don't extend that out and go, I want X, Y, and Z light fixture, and I want a ceiling fan in this spot, and I want a chandelier in this spot, or I want 6 panel doors instead of 2 panel doors with an arch, you're going to get what that contractor wants to put in there, and typically it's going to be what they can find with their rep at Home Depot. So one key thing there I've seen a lot of the time, it comes down to vanities. If you don't dictate the SKU, that's the word I was looking for, you need to put that in there, so you're not going to get the compound like the MDF type box. You're going to get the plywood dovetail box. So all of this stuff, first step needs to be written down. You need to walk the aisles of Home Depot and Menards. You need to choose what materials you want in your flip or in your rental. The second point is making sure they see it, because so many times we've been on site and you'll get 3 guys out there. They'll come probably at half-hour intervals, and you'll say, hey, how are you? Here's my scope of work. I printed it out for you. They'll tuck it in their back pocket. They'll pull out their, sometimes if you're lucky, they'll pull out their tape measure and they'll start walking around the property. But in the meantime, they've not looked at what you want. So how do you know you're getting an apples to apples bid if they're not looking at what SKUs that you've wandered around Menards for half a day on your weekend looking to pick out? So first step, write the stuff down that you want done and where you want it put and exactly what material. Second step is make sure they know about it. Okay. Documentation around lien waivers. Actually, no, the first one. Next part is cash flow with them. Managing your not managing your contractor's cash flow, although a lot of them have a lot of trouble with that. But setting expectations on what you expect to see done before they get paid. So, hey, I'm going to pay you 10% down and I expect demo to be complete. Okay, perfect. They know when they're going to get their money. Next point's a benchmark. What do you want to see done next? Boom, boom, boom. And you say, this is what I want to see. Here's how much I'm going to pay you. This is what I want to see. Here's how much I'm going to pay you. Because who's also going to want that information? Probably your hard money lender. The guy that does the draw inspections is going to want to know when you're going to be asking for draws. So we call it a benchmark payment schedule. Typically, you only need to do it in 3 or 4 different draws. But at least if your contractor knows when he's going to get paid, I'll tell you right now, he's probably going to bust his ass to get to that benchmark. The next part is when you're handing over money, lien waivers. Get a lien waiver signed. I don't care. A lot of these guys, 80% of the guys I've ever dealt with will push back on it. They want their money, you get the lien waiver signed. Typically, you're going to have to fill it out themselves. If you've seen a lien waiver form, there are standard Illinois lien waivers. There's both partial and full lien waivers. They're intense. They're one-pagers. They are intense. Get used to them. Find out and memorize exactly what piece of information need to go in which boxes, and then work with them on it. The amount of lien waivers I've had signed on the hood of the truck, just get her done, because these guys will turn around. You'll have a great relationship 90% of the time, and then all your issues will come up in that last 10%. You wish you never did business with them. So just have your ducks in a row, your T's crossed, your I's dotted, all that sort of stuff, and protect yourself by setting expectations. Any questions on that before I kind of talk about a little bit of setting expectations with tenants?
Are you saying you have a lien waiver signed at each draw or at the end as you're finishing up the project?
Anytime they get money. So it depends, getting back to the benchmark schedule, it kind of depends on how you break that down. But if you maybe even break down one benchmark payment into 2 halves, every time you give them money, every time you Zelle quick pay them or hand over a check, get your lien waivers done. A lot of the buyers on the flips these days too, I mean, the new 7.0 multi-board contract states in there about permits. Was this thing done with permits? So a lot of the time, these finances, the lenders too, are going to be looking for lien waivers on the back end as well. So just paperwork. But yeah, to answer your question there, Margaret, it's every time you hand over money, get a lien waiver. Does it happen all the time? No, it doesn't. But if you can set the standard to be that, it'll protect you down the line.
Where do you get a standard lien waiver or partial lien waiver?
You can Google it. There's a PDF you can download. A lot of legal sites or law firms will actually have it stored available on some of their websites. If you type into Google, I think it's Illinois lien waiver or Illinois partial lien waiver, it should come up. You can just download it and save the blank version. Like I said, it's pretty intense, so just be some good bedtime reading, put you right to sleep. But if you can learn the different boxes and where their information is, it's one of those things. If you can make it simpler for them, you will get the result a lot easier. You'll get the result you're looking for. If you email it to them, 9 out of 10 times you're not going to get it back, and they're going to be hounding you for money.
Mark, what's your experience with buying materials instead of having the contractor pick it out? Like what I typically have done in the past is have the guys go to Home Depot. I do a phone sale. I know exactly what they're buying, that kind of thing.
I've done it multiple ways. As long as they understand in the upfront bid that their bid includes my material list, and that's a separate PDF than the scope of work. Like, here is my finishing materials list. Nuts and bolts, drywall, all studs, all that sort of stuff's not in there. It's just finishing stuff. It's the stuff that the buyer wants to see. It's your casing, your trim, your light fixtures. I've also done it the other way, where Home Depot, you have a pro account with Home Depot, and they'll call you up. Hey, I've got Mr. Contractor here. He's got X, Y, and Z. They will actually text you a link that you can click on it and see his shopping list before you pay for it. So I've done both ways. Yeah.
For rentals, I've always done, I pay for materials and just pay them a labor quote. I was just curious if that's, and again, it's a little different if you're just turning an apartment. It's a small, maybe 4,000, 8,000. It's a smaller job than like a flip.
Yeah, absolutely. We've done that to a degree too. I always had trouble because my experience was in like the cost of doing a kitchen, for example, rather than labor versus material breakout. So, but that's really going to be dependent on your relationship with your contractor. Depends how transparent they're willing to be. Depends what sort of conversations you can have. To that point, actually, if at any point your gut doesn't feel right, you've got to address that. There's so many times we've woken up at 3 a.m. having questions and concerns, and you have to address that stuff. I mean, being able to sit down at the table with a contractor and get him out of the field, sit down somewhere and go, dude, this is the stuff, like, remember this documentation we put in place? This is the stuff. You need to be talking about those kind of things. Otherwise, you'll turn up one day on the job site, he won't be there. And typically, he won't be there with your money either. So, any other questions at all?
I did find a lien waiver online, but it looks like it needs to be notarized.
It does. So typically the final one, as a habit, you want to get the final one notarized. Typically the partials don't need to be, but absolutely get it notarized, get them to get it notarized. You can tell them they can go to any UPS, they can go to a FedEx store. It's typically about $1 a page, and that thing's only one page anyway. I'll tell you right now, these conversations, especially around lien waivers, in my experience, they're not fun. Those guys never want to do it. Contractors don't want to do it because it's more administrative paperwork. You typically will find it in a lot of the higher end construction companies. They'll get their ducks in a row and put the paperwork in a package for you. But that doesn't happen in the games we play. So you have to set the standard. You have to set the expectations. If they don't want to work for you, and if they don't want to fill out some of the stuff or agree to it, you get out of there, because it's your investment. It's your cash flow. So I've got a couple of blank, I've got the blank PDF. So John, I can either post it up there, but anyone Googling it too can find it there.
Yeah, it comes right up. I Googled it while you were talking and it was right there.
Cool. Any other questions on scopes, material, benchmarks, SKUs?
How much work do you work with attorneys on getting forms like that, figuring out how to handle it?
There's two different questions: figuring out how to handle it, or figuring out or getting them to drop the paperwork.
I'd never have them. I'm not talking about having them do a lien waiver for you, but just getting your ducks in a row so that you've got everything set up before you hire someone.
Yeah, one big thing you could probably talk to your attorney about is having your own independent contractor agreement, one that's specific to how you want to operate. Have I done that? No, you can get a pretty good standard one. This industry, it comes back to communication. The better communication you have with any of your your power team, your contractor, your property manager, your lender, your broker, anyone, better communication you can have, the easier the game's going to be. But no, to answer your question there, Vicky, I haven't necessarily ever had an attorney draw up that kind of stuff for me. I am not an attorney, so I'll say right now, if you do what you need to do for your own investing, but yeah. Cool. Good questions. Tenants, same thing. Setting expectations. I was managing, it turned out to be, it was about 63, 64 doors, mixture of single families, condos, multi-families. Anyone that has a mixed portfolio knows that you deal with mixed things. Single family, you might deal with a roof. Condos, you're probably dealing with a leaky ceiling or an HOA. Talk to me about HOAs and handling different ones. I'll tell you all day. And then multifamily, small multifamilies, it's noise complaints. But it's all about setting expectations. So I got so sick of having just difficult conversations at the back end when they moved out, that I started putting stuff in writing and expanding out my welcome packet, called it the welcome packet. Expanded, my buddy that I was working with created created a foundational packet that we worked on, and over the years, that every lesson we learned, we just put it down, we put it into writing, and then we spoke to the tenants about it when they moved in. So there were typically 5 documents that I did. The first one was a welcome letter, and it said, "Hey, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, congratulations, welcome to 123 Main Street. Here's what you can expect if your rent is late. There's a bit like per your lease, there's a percentage late fee. Here's how you can pay your rent. Here's what it costs," because typically some of these softwares include a convenience fee. Here are the phone numbers for the utility companies that service your town where your property is in, like all this sort of stuff. That's the way I think of this, and this might have been a better way to start. The way I think of this is, you turn up to a hotel, you want to know anything about that hotel, you go to the desk in the corner and you look at the hotel directory. That's going to tell you check-in, check-out times, all that sort of stuff. So we tried to put it together like a hotel directory. There's the welcome letter. The next part was a cleaning list. Hey, we've gone around, we've taken pictures and videos. We know to what degree this property is clean. We expect these things to be checked off when you move out. The next one was a live document, and because it was always changing, we were always learning lessons. I called it the expectations, tips and tricks document, and everything went in here. Every single pushback I had on move out, the answer to it went in this part of the document. And there was, here's how to turn off a shutoff valve behind your toilet. There is, here's an electrical panel and how to switch a breaker. There's, make sure you don't flush flushable wipes down your toilet because they're not flushable and a plumber will be coming to your sewer line. There was how, like, make sure you change or remove the dryer lint. Some people, some tenants that move into these properties, it might be their first time away from home, for example. They might be in their mid-20s, late 20s. It might be their first time out on their own. Some of them don't know these things. They just don't know it needs to happen. So you need to tell them about it, because, and then tell them what can happen if they don't do it. Meaning, hey, dryer lint could cause a dryer fire. I mean, flushable wipes, you flush flushable wipes down, you are going to have a sewer backup. So all that sort of stuff. Another really interesting thing that we had come up a couple of times was candles. I had to teach tenants where to burn candles if they wanted to. Obviously, try and stay away from burning them in a rental property if you can. But what would happen is they'd move out. And I don't know how familiar people are with candles, but cheap candles put out a lot more soot than expensive candles. So when they put it on the top of their dresser, it emits this arch of soot. So when they move their dresser away, that's a pain in the butt to get off. They don't, it's another thing, they just don't know to think about it. So make them aware, at least they can then make a conscious decision like, hey, when I move out, how much do I want to protect my security deposit here? Moving on, kind of down the list of the 5 documents I have, a copy of their lease is important, and Katie Hayes is on here. Hey, Katie, how are you? Her husband and Katie, so Rob and Katie, were the dedicated agents doing a lot of the leasing work for my buddy. His name's Ben. So they were doing a lot of the front end stuff on placing the tenant. It's very important putting a good solid lease, A, in place, and B, we used to always print it out and put it into the packet, because then I know that they have a physical copy. They always have an electronic copy too, but I know they always have a physical copy. So we put that in there too. Another side note, when I was on site moving them in, having the lease on the kitchen counter as a part of this welcome packet, I could go, guys, hey, nice to meet you. Can you show me your driver's license so I can pair it against the lease so I know who I'm talking to? So there's a little bit of a security measure there as well. And the last thing was a move-in condition report. It's essentially think of it like a blank spreadsheet printed out on paper. It's got the address up top there. They've got the ability to sign it. But I would walk them through the house and say, guys, within the next 7 days, typically before you move your furniture in, go through the house and write down anything that is of concern to you. Write down, I mean, we had kitchens, bathrooms, cabinets, drawers, blinds, go through the place and write down anything that's of concern for you. Two good things here is what that allows you to do is match up your idea of the condition versus theirs. But one thing we started using it for too was as a really good tenant rapport building exercise where they would mail it or scan it, email it back to you, and they go, hey, my door doesn't close properly. And so you can prove, okay, perfect. That's something that's a minor issue. We can get out and take care of them. And it's not just, hey, here's your keys. We'll see you in a year when it's time for the lease to when the lease is ready to renew. So it's a little rapport builder there. But yeah, that's really the five documents within the welcome packet that we put together for them. Again, it's just setting expectations. So,
Hey, Mark, my name is Diana. How you doing?
good, you?
Good, good. Thanks for coming out and talking to us tonight.
Absolutely.
So yeah, I'm a little bit curious about what you were just talking about, like tenant rapport when you make repairs for them. Are you just talking about maybe keeping some documentation that shows what you've done for them upon move out, or what are we talking about?
The biggest thing is responsiveness.
I mean, like we do that, but I was just wondering what you meant. I mean, of course, if they call, they need a repair, you repair it. Are you talking about something beyond that?
No, it's just it's an opportunity to prove yourself as a property manager, at least in my experience. It was like, because I've gone to a certain degree where a tenant moving into one of the properties asked me to sign a court affidavit saying I would take care of X, Y, and Z. And because what happened is their previous landlord, she lived there, I think she lived there about 10 years, just wasn't responsive. So the biggest issue that these tenants want when they move into some of these properties was, yeah, great, my landlord's got my security deposit now, but is he really going to step up when I actually need something done? And the balance is it's not to the degree where they're going to try and take advantage of it. You've got to determine where you're going to push back and not. But there is a good opportunity in that first 30 days to just show that you're kind of a team. Granted, you're not really a team because your loyalty lies with the property owner, whether it's yourself or whether it's your property management client. But at the same time, you are there. If they have something that goes wrong, they can call you and it will get taken care of.
Right. I wasn't entirely tracking with you, I guess. So yeah, I agree with you completely, and no question about it. So I have a really good problem to have. I've only a couple properties, and both of them have longtime tenants. So one has been there for 10 years. So the other one 5 going on 6. And I want to do updates. And I'm figuring out why painters and others want the tenants gone when they, it's easier when there's no tenant. So when you have rental property, I guess I look at these rentals and they're not making the appreciation I'd like, right? So one of my profit centers is not doing as well as I'd like. And I'm contemplating selling them. I went to refinance them and ended up not doing that. It wasn't benefiting me. And I'm just curious if you've ever had that situation and when you understand it's time to sell and invest in something different.
So the finance and the acquisition side, a lot of that was reliant on my buddy Ben. Like the determination when to sell or when to upgrade. What I can talk to is the conversation with the tenant around that. Whether you're going to look at upgrading. Two things you can look at. You can look at either selling it, or you can look at the cost of an upgrade and then pitching a rent increase to the tenant to essentially offset it. Like you're looking for cash on cash return.
Right.
So I know that's not an answer to your question, but
maybe that's to John. I don't know if John, you have, or anybody else has experience with that, but I thought, and I don't know if you're holding rentals, Mark, or if you're mostly repairing properties and flipping them and moving on.
The stuff in my personal portfolio is completely rehab, so I don't necessarily have any of these issues. The points I can talk to is about the conversation with tenants around upgrades, and especially around new tenants that you inherit. I've had plenty of kitchen table conversations with tenants that we've inherited because we expanded the portfolio pretty rapidly. Went from about 24 doors to 63 in 3 years.
Oh, boy.
There were a lot of kitchen table conversations at 6 o'clock at night around what were the new owners' expectations. And obviously with an inherited tenant, you have to abide by their lease that's in place. But at the same time, if you mutually agree to move to a new lease, you can do so. So it's all how you balance that conversation.
Yeah, I'd love to hear about that conversation. It's worth having because I'm having that with both these tenants and I'm going, I don't have a great list of things that I want to accomplish with them, right? I don't have a format or a goal that's clear to me on what I want to get through to them in making these upgrades, right? In their bathrooms or whatever it is. I'm kind of asking them, and clearly you shouldn't be asking them, you should be telling them this is what's going to happen. And it's not really built into our lease that, every so many, I didn't think I'd have this quote unquote problem, but I'm not, we're not slumlords. We keep it decent. They do pay a good rent and I want to keep it up. So I want to be able to say, listen, we're coming in this month, we're redoing this bathroom, this is what to expect. And so as a landlord, what's appropriate? What kind of inconvenience is appropriate to put the renter through? Or do you just, let it ride? So.
How far out are you from the end of their lease?
Oh, it's not too bad. I mean, it could be in, let's see, I think it's July.
Yeah, the reason I asked that is because we always had those upgrade conversations when it was time to renew. So it was like, hey, granted, rent typically always goes up year on year here in Chicago, so you're always having that rent increase anyway.
Mhm.
But then it was, hey, we're thinking about doing these upgrades, or hey, are there upgrades that you would like to see done? And then you balance the cost of that upgrade against a proposed increase in rent. And they can make the choice. Because when you give them the power to make that choice themselves, they're more compliant compliance is not the right word. When there's the inconvenience, they are more cooperative. Carpet was always a conversation.
Yeah.
So the thing I always told them is, this is the rent increase. Here's your new lease at this rent amount if you just want to renew. But if you'd like, say, new carpet, it's going to increase by this amount. And they'll go, okay, yeah, it's the decisions in their hands. They can go, yes, I'll pay them more rent. And for you as the investor, you can start looking at it as a cash on cash. But more importantly, what happens is when the guy turns up with the carpet, I would tell them, you're responsible for moving your own furniture. Like, I need you to move the stuff into the kitchen to get out of the living room so they can do the carpet if you want new carpet. And typically they were pretty cooperative with it. Is it always an easy conversation? No, but typically they're pretty cooperative because they know they're getting an upgrade.
Actually, that helps. So thank you for that.
Those are tough conversations for sure. I'm curious if anybody else, there's several people in here I know that have managed buildings for a long time. Anybody else want to chime in on how they've handled those situations?
I think the way Mark outlined it is perfect. If you give the tenant a choice, I can raise it $20, do nothing, or zero, do nothing, or I can give you $100, new bathroom, whatever your pricing is. I think as long as the tenant picks, then they have buy-in to the decision. So I agree 100% with that. And you give them two options, both options are good for you.
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, you can look at, say, a $1,200 carpet replacement and increase the rent by $100, and you're granted carpet's depreciating, but within that first year, you're making your $1,200. So obviously using round numbers here, but those are the things you start balancing out.
Our experience with inherited tenants is generally if we try to give them a rent increase, they'll move. And then you have no problem doing the upgrades. You don't keep your tenants that way. If you want to keep your tenants, I think that's the bottom line. Do you want to make money or do you want to keep the tenants, the long-term tenants?
That's interesting too, Vicky, because if you know your tenants and you know who you can approach with these conversations versus who you just know are going to say, no, I'm done, I'm out. So this is where, I mean, it's a people business, isn't it? I mean, you have to, it's relationships, but it's a capital game as well. So you have to balance, you have to weigh up both.
I've done this too recently with inherited tenants, and I've had mixed experiences in the past. My first building was amazing. I still have 3 of the 4 tenants. The most recent building, I just had 4 legacy tenants move out. I was telling several people before we started, all within a 3-month period. They're stealing fridges. They're doing all kinds of crazy stuff. I'm actually very excited to see them go because they were paying $650. I raised them to $900, and for them to go to market, which is $1,200, is just unfathomable for the same thing that they've been living with for years. So the only reason they were long term is because they were paying such below market rent. So as soon as rents started going up, like Vicky said, they were history, man. Very little interest in paying market rents.
How fast were you able to raise their rents, John, as the new owner of that building? Was it incremental over a couple of years, or was it like, hey, this is what we're doing? And
Yeah, for better or for worse. So everybody was paying $650. Market, I just discovered, is about $1,200 for these units if I clean them up. And so I raised everybody last year to $900, and they were all extremely upset. And in retrospect, if I could go back, I probably just would have cleared the building out, especially knowing about the pandemic. It would have been way easier and more profitable, but hindsight's 2020.
how would you have
So,
done that though? How would you have gotten them all out?
just everybody was month to month. So I just would have non-renewed everybody and given them, a lot of times I've done 60 days instead of 30 to kind of help you because it is stressful for people.
Yeah.
I think when you do a turnaround play, you have to expect that some of these legacy tenants are kind of stiff you on the way out, honestly. Nobody ever talks about it, but you have very little leverage. You don't have the security deposit. You don't really know if they own the fridge or not. I said, jokingly that they stole my fridge, but who knows? Maybe they bought the fridge because a lot of these old slumlords don't actually take care of their buildings or buy appliances or things. So it's just part of the game when you buy a value add property, but it's harder with a really good tenant that you want to keep. But I guess at the end of the day, though, the tenant relationship is pretty transient, honestly, because you can have a long-term tenant and then they decide they're going to buy a house or move to a different area and they're gone. And all that goodwill you thought you're building up is gone too. It's a balancing act, I think, always. You want to treat people fairly, but it's still a business. It's your money at stake, not theirs. So
The other thing we've done with legacy tenants where we really do want to keep them, but we want to renovate their apartment, is we've moved them to other vacant units, preferably within the same building, but not always. And then they can either accept the new place or move back into the newly renovated place. And people really like newly renovated places. And there have been occasional tenants who are willing to pay a lot more once they see the place that's available to them.
Yeah, I've had a couple of those difficult, like I say, kitchen table conversations. We took over a 6-unit in Bloomingdale that one of their tenants had been there 8 years, paying $650 and market rent was $890. And so really, I mean, from a strategy perspective, you go into the building and you prioritize who you're going to have conversations with, essentially, because you can't afford, well, a lot of the time, unless you factor it into the numbers, you can't afford to turn the whole building at once. So you do have to go unit by unit and start having those conversations. And it might be an 18-month play. It might be a 3-year play. It might be hey, turn the whole thing and let's vacate it. Let's rehab everything. Let's go. So it depends on everyone's individual situation. But yeah, those conversations, they're not fun to have. But make sure you go into that with fact and with data. And if you have data, I won't say it's hard to argue because there will be a confrontation, but you can have it unemotionally. So I'll just always go in with comps and say, hey, this is what the units around this property that are in the similar or close to condition. You've essentially had a discount for the last 8 years, so hopefully you've been putting that extra money aside. typically know, but it's
I've been using Rentometer for rent comps. Is that what everybody else is using?
Rentometer, I'll be honest, I was using that too. I mean, obviously, unless you've got access to MLS and you can run rental comps, that sort of stuff, but Rentometer sets a pretty good average. Yeah, going with data.
In general, it's best to accumulate a lot of data. It's very time consuming, but accumulating data from a lot of different rental sites that are preferably ones that are very locally based, is the best source of data. The MLS actually isn't the best source of data, although as a broker that I use it anyway.
Vicky, what did you say your favorite source of data is?
We use very local rental platforms. So if we were renting in Chicago, we'd use domu.com and combine that with apartments.com. If we were working in Oak Park, we'd use Oak Park Apartments or some kind of local place because that's your best data.
And the market's always changing. There's always units coming online and coming offline. And so, when I'm listing something, I just pull up all the comparables that are on the market right now because those are my competition. I don't really care, what happened a year ago or a month ago. I care like, what am I competing against right now? I'm trying to get a customer and there's a product, I have a product and they have a product and we're competing for the customer. So let's look at what's out there and what it costs and what the quality of the finish is. And I try to price mine competitively in that, in that field.
I think networking is really useful for that too. So, I mean, I recently was pricing out 3-bedroom apartments in Berwyn, for instance, and I called Vicky because she had just leased out one. I saw it on the MLS and said, hey, that's perfect information because I could get the backstory too, not just the price, but how hard was it to rent at that price? How many showings did you have? What was your interest level? Because there's more than just what you rented for. It's like how, what's the velocity that you can get that renter in there? Is it going to take you 6 months? There are MLS comps that take forever to get those prices. So
one thing we did a couple of times, and don't be afraid to do it, but we would set up showings with our competition a block away and go and walk his property or their property and get a feel of the quality of the finishes, of the space, of the amenities, of how hard is it to park? Is your parking easier than theirs? Because you want to know when your tenant's going to be looking at both properties if they're on the market at the same time.
that's awesome advice.
Hey, Mark, on the contractor side, do you have maybe like any averages for labor rates that you've been paying lately? Like what's your average rate that you've been paying for a plumber or paying for electrician or paying for like finished carpentry?
So in all honesty, I've been behind the desk for the better part of the last year and off the project management. So I don't have up-to-date stuff. I honestly don't know really how COVID's affected a lot of that. We at Click Invest, we do have our own construction division. So that's set up that way. From an electrician perspective, I mean, I've got the data, I just don't have it in front of me. So I'd have to look back on it. So I wish I could answer your question. But we were like, for a kitchen, for example, we were paying $7,500 to $8,500 for a standard kitchen. That's labor and material though. Drywall is one that's stuck in my head because I dealt with it a lot. That's typically $30 to $35 a sheet for hung and taped and mudded. Painting on typically labor and materials from memory, we're around about $1.50 a square foot, $1.65 a square foot. Again, it's who you talk to, who you know, ask around. I wish I could be more specific.
That's good. Just get an idea. Thanks.
Yeah.
For building rapport with your tenants on repairs and your responsiveness there, is there anything that you use to manage those, or is that just through text and email, or is there a system that you use?
So you mean software wise?
Yeah,
Yeah.
or anything else.
We used a couple of different things. Early on, we used spreadsheet and Gmail. We moved to we had Grasshopper as a phone system. We went everything from Yardi. We used Yardi very, very early on. That's more set up for the enterprise type property management companies. Just wasn't built for us. Although I think now they've got a smaller portfolio one. We moved from there to Buildium. I did the RFP or the bid out between Buildium and AppFolio. Very similar product. Buildium to me, I just had a better relationship with them and it seemed a bit more user friendly. And then they've got a good portal there for tenants and communication type stuff. But honestly, there's a lot come on the market this last couple of years. There's a company called Nest Egg. Funnily enough, he's another Kiwi living in Chicago that created that company. So check them out. I don't have any affiliation with them, but no, there's a number of different portals. There's Cozy, there's erentpayment.com if all you'd want is a payment portal, electronic payment portal. So there's a bunch.
All right, thanks.
If you're thinking of jumping to higher level software, I think Mark alluded to, don't until you really need it. I'm in the middle of jumping to AppFolio and it's like jumping off a cliff from Cozy to AppFolio. I need about 4 people working for me to figure it out.
Do you do maintenance through Cozy?
Do I?
Mm-hmm.
I did not. It has that feature, but I'm also not really doing it through AppFolio either because you have to know how to do it. That's what I'm referencing.
Yeah.
Why did you make that decision to upgrade your system?
To be blunt, the pain in the ass factor got too much. So Yardi, I guess from the beginning, we probably thought Yardi was something we'd grow into. And then as we got deeper and deeper and deeper into it, it just wasn't flexible enough to meet what we needed. Buildium very much was. Buildium's a great platform. But to John's point, do all of your research first on the first thing you want to look at, because moving is not a fun task, especially as your portfolio grows. It took us close to 4 months to onboard Buildium. And then it takes the remainder of that financial year because you've got the overlap of data from Yardi versus data from Buildium. So it's not a fun process. If you've got a small portfolio, and I would call it, any 30 to 50 doors, do as, I don't know, how do I say this? Do it as manually as you want to. If you feel like you're buying something, you're not using a lot of the features, because I can talk to that about Buildium, we weren't using a lot, but you're probably paying too much. Keep it simple.
So we're getting towards the end of our time here. Does anybody have any kind of last questions for Mark? He's provided a ton of value in this meetup. I just want to make sure everybody had all their questions answered.
I had one more on for your move-in report. So are you going through and basically doing that report before you have them do it and send it to you?
I wasn't doing the report. I'd take pictures and detailed video.
Okay.
So I would go in, you go into every room and you take pictures from every corner of the room. Take a picture looking down at the carpet or the hardwood or the vinyl, and take a picture looking at the ceiling. Make sure you're in different lights too, because if you take pictures at night versus the evening, you can see different blemishes on the walls. Take pictures under cabinets. Take pictures under cabinets. And here's why. There's a story for you. We had one property in Glendale Heights. Glendale Heights does annual rental inspections. They will go in and look under the cabinets for you. And so what I found was a incorrectly wired garbage disposal. And the rental inspector goes, "You got to fix that. Come on, what's this about?" I said, "We didn't do it." And I showed him the picture on my phone while he's standing there on site. I'm like, "The tenant did this. I will get it fixed, and I'll get you pictures." So it's, again, gets back to setting expectations, protect yourself, protect your asset. Eh? So same with video. Walk around slowly, turn on your closet lights, look at the ceilings. So there will be a time where you have to use it in court. And the bigger the packet you can turn up to in court, you look a lot more prepared, eh? Well, John, thanks for having me, mate.
Yeah, thank you
Yes.
so much for coming, Mark. This was awesome, man. Great content tonight.
Yeah, any questions or follow-up, you can reach me at mark@clickinvest.com. That's just the email I use. Phone number, and we can post it there. It's just 847-942-8501. I love sharing stories. I'm learning every day as well. I mean, we're all learning, so, and we've got a lot more to learn depending on how the markets are going to change over the next couple of years. So it's going to be an interesting ride.
For sure. And thanks again for sharing all the information you did. Really tremendous value add. And for everybody, if you want to see the replay of this, we'll have it up on YouTube here in the next few days, and we'll blast that out to the list. And looking forward to seeing everybody for next month. We have Mark Ainley. He's already promoting his meetup like crazy. So apparently it's supposed to be the best damn burr meetup. So we'll see how that one goes. I'm excited about it. So until next time, thanks again, everybody, for coming. This was great.
Thanks, John.
Thanks a lot, John.
Thanks, guys.